Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Lo and I'm obsessed with vintage fashion. Today we're going to be starting a new series of videos called Where Do I Shop? I want this series to be all about where you can find clothes to fill up your vintage wardrobe. I know that when I first started dressing vintage, I wasn't really sure where to look or what things to keep in mind when I was buying clothes. So I wanted to make this video to kind of help anybody out if you're venturing into the world of vintage fashion and you were in the same position that I was in. In this video, I'll be talking about pretty popular vintage reproduction brands and retailers. In the next video that I make in this series, I want to kind of wrap up with that. This will be a part 1 and then the next will be a part 2 about kind of more the fast fashion-ish side of vintage reproduction. Later on, I want to make a video about vintage brands that aren't quite as popular, that you don't hear everybody talking about and doing haul videos from all the time. And later on, I want to make another video about using thrift stores and resale apps like Depop to find vintage style clothing. By the way, none of this is sponsored. All of these are based on my true research and opinions, but if anybody ever wants to sponsor me, I'm willing. So, what things should you keep in mind when you're searching for clothing to fit your new vintage style? I have 4 bullet points that I've made, and I'll be using each of these 4 bullet points to kind of talk about each brand that I'll be discussing throughout the series. All of these are things that can be of varying importance to you. If you're first starting out, maybe none of these are important to you except the price one. All of us have different priorities and different things to keep in mind when we shop, and this is a completely judgment-free zone. So all I'm doing is putting information out here for you to have that I think would be good for you to have, that is not necessarily easily accessible. I really think that it's important to buy as a smart consumer and know what you're buying, but that doesn't mean that you have to necessarily care about one thing or the other. I'm just, again, providing this information for you. So the first bullet point is vintage or vintage reproduction. All of the videos in this series are going to be about vintage reproduction. I personally don't tend to buy a ton of true vintage items, just because in the 1950s it wasn't really acceptable to be somebody of my size, and I'm not even plus size. But it's very difficult to find things that would fit me, so I don't have as much experience there. But it is definitely possible for you to have a whole wardrobe filled with solely true vintage and no vintage reproduction items. Just know that this video is going to be about vintage reproduction first. Also, when buying true vintage clothing, it tends to get a little bit pricier than reproduction clothing, and you do have to be a little bit more mindful about the upkeep and maintenance of your clothing. You can't typically just throw it in the wash with the rest of your modern clothes. You have to put a lot of effort and care into taking good care of them. The second bullet point that I'll be talking about with all of these brands is price point. This is a big one. Not everybody who's first getting into vintage style has a lot of money. Not everybody who's been into vintage style for the longest time has a lot of money. I'll talk more about cheaper brands in my later videos. I'll also talk about thrifting and resale apps, like I said, and that tends to make things a little bit cheaper and more accessible. Just so you know, all of the brands that I'm about to talk about in this video are what I would consider mid-price range. You're not going to get a dress for as cheap as 15 bucks, but you also aren't going to be spending like $300 on a dress. The third bullet point that I'll be using to talk about these brands is ethics and sustainability. I know that as we talk more about consumer awareness and environmentalism and workers' rights, that these are issues that are becoming more prominent and more at the forefront of consumers' minds, and I think that that's great. If that's not something that is super important to you at the moment, or not something that you can afford to have be important to you, again, that's okay. I'm once again just providing information about these brands for you to make the best decision for you. And the fourth bullet point that I'll be using to talk about all of these is sizing options. What is their size range? What do they offer? And how inclusive are they with their sizing? Okay, now that I've gone over all of the things that I think that you should keep in mind as a consumer in order to best suit your needs, let's get into the shops. The first 3 that I'll be talking about separately are Unique Vintage, Collectif, and ModCloth. And the reason that I'm grouping them together like this is because they tend to collaborate with each other. I mean, all of these brands do, but they tend to have a lot of like collaboration going on, and I think that they're kind of like the mammoths of the vintage world right now. If you just type in unique vintage haul, ModCloth haul, Collectif haul into the search bar up there, you will find millions of videos of people talking about their clothing. So thought I would just knock them out of the way in my first video. So, Unique Vintage. Unique Vintage sells reproduction vintage clothing that kind of covers all decades. I do think that they have a broader range of things for the 50s specifically, but they have a very decently sized 70s section. They have a lot of flapper dresses for the 20s. They have a lot of 30s and 40s style like wrap dresses. They genuinely have a great selection of pretty much everything for the 20th century. I wrote down some data in my notes over here. So their dresses usually range from $60 to $90, but they have even fancier, more formal gowns that are in the $100 to $200 range. And they even sell wedding dresses that go up to about $300 to $400, which honestly for a wedding dress, kind of a great deal. Their tops, which I'm including t-shirts, blouses, and knitwear, are typically in the $30 to $60 range. Some fancier blouses and sweaters can go up to $90. That is not a ton of them though. Their skirts and pants are typically in the $50 to $80 range. They also have a wide range of accessories, including jewelry, scarves, stockings, and shoes, which each have their own individual price points. To give you an idea, the shoes are typically $50 to $90, and the accessories can sometimes be even cheaper than $10. As far as their ethics go, Unique Vintage is a woman-owned company, and their corporate responsibility page states, "At Unique Vintage, we strive to partner with manufacturers and suppliers whom we believe act in a responsible manner, including having no involvement with slavery, human trafficking, forced labor, or child labor in violation of international standards." As far as environmental sustainability goes, I was not able to find any sort of sustainability statement on their site, but a lot of their clothing is made out of cotton and polyester. Polyester isn't great for the environment, but I can personally attest to the quality of their clothes. I think that they hold up. I think that a lot of their pieces are truly built to last. For their sizing, almost all of their own Unique Vintage brand clothing is available in size extra small up to 5X, which with their brand sizing chart encompasses US dress size 2 to 26. Obviously, they could expand that if they wanted, but I think that that is a great range, and that is the best and most inclusive range of all of these companies that I'll be talking about today. All of their clothing, whether they're straight sizes or plus sizes, are offered in the same cut, style, and pattern. Plus sizes aren't just given their own tiny sliver of the website where they can only buy weird neutral turtlenecks and like cheetah print lumpy dresses. I'm looking at you, Forever 21. As far as my personal experiences go, I currently have a couple of pieces from Unique Vintage, and I have to say that they are my favorite brand to shop from. Their clothing is like always right up my alley, and it's really well made and it holds up for a while. Next up, Collectif. That is probably the biggest name in the vintage reproduction game right now. They're pretty similar to Unique Vintage as far as their style goes. Their clothing usually seems to specialize in the 40s and 50s, but they kind of pull inspiration from all sorts of decades. They're a UK-based brand. They were established in the year 2000, and they sell clothing by other vintage reproduction brands as well as their own line called Collectif Mainline. For their pricing, their dresses typically range from $70 to $100. Their tops are usually in the $40 to $65 range. Skirts and pants are usually in the $65 to $80 range. They also sell shoes in the $60 to $90 range, and they have other accessories that tend to be under $20. As far as their ethics and sustainability goes, they have a pretty long ethics and sustainability statement on their website, which I will link to in the description below. Basically, it's a lot of fluff that kind of boils down to this. They follow all of the production and labor laws that are in place in wherever it is that they're working, which means that their labor practices can change based on what country they're working in. They currently have clothing production factories located in Bangladesh, China, and Vietnam. And in my opinion, as somebody who thinks a lot about worldwide labor laws, that is something that makes me raise my eyebrows a little bit. The minimum wage in each of those countries is not great. There's kind of a reason that Western companies will seek out factories in countries like Bangladesh to produce their products because they can get cheaper labor than they would if they had factories in the US or UK. In Vietnam, the minimum wage averages out to about $150 a month. The Chinese minimum wage is equivalent to about $3.70 American dollars an hour, which is half of the current American minimum wage. And even that is not great. And Bangladesh is often cited as having some of the worst minimum wages in the world, and their minimum wage equates to $17.67 in American money a month. Collectif's statement says that they strive to pay their workers fair wages, but they don't specify what they mean by fair. I personally would love to know more about their labor practices and how they really pay their employees. I think that that kind of transparency would be very beneficial. That aside, as far as their sizing goes, the Collectif mainline brand typically offers clothing in UK sizing 6 to 22, which in American sizing is dress size 2 to 18. I think that there is a lot of room for improvement there, but at least there's some mid sizes in addition to the straight sizes. As far as my personal experience goes, I don't currently own any clothing from Collectif, though there is a dress by them that they currently have for sale on Unique Vintage's website that I've been eyeing for a while, so I might have to do a review on that once I get it. From what I've heard, their clothing holds up really nicely, holds up for years, and it's usually the go-to vintage reproduction brand for a lot of people. ModCloth often collaborates with both Unique Vintage and Collectif, and I personally would consider them to have a more 1960s inspired look. Most of their dresses are not long enough for like a 50s look, but I would say that they're just the right length for 60s vibes. I honestly would consider ModCloth to be a modern clothing brand that takes inspiration from vintage styles rather than a true vintage reproduction brand. So it might be a great brand to look into if you're thinking about slowly easing yourself into the vintage world and seeing if it's right for you. Their dresses tend to be around $55 to $120, which is a pretty big range, but it just depends on the style. Their tops tend to be in the $40 to $70 range. Skirts and pants are usually in the $40 to $80 range. And again, they also sell shoes and accessories at a pretty average price point, pretty comparable to Collectif's pricing. As far as ethics and sustainability go, I could not find an ethics or sustainability statement on their website. A lot of their own ModCloth brand clothing is made from a blend of cotton and viscose, which are organic materials. They do use polyester as well. Most clothing companies do at this point, so just putting the information out there. A few years ago, they were bought out by Walmart, which did cause a lot of consumers, including myself, to stop buying from them for a period of time because Walmart is probably one of the most unethical companies in the world. However, they were recently sold again, so they are no longer operating underneath Walmart. I believe they have no affiliation with them anymore. They were bought by an independent investment and acquisition company, and they're running pretty independently again, as far as I know. Still, as to what their independent ethics actually are, I am not 100% sure. One of ModCloth's big company values seems to be body positivity and inclusive sizing, which leads me to sizing. ModCloth sells clothing from a lot of different brands, but just talking about their own ModCloth brand, they typically offer clothing in sizes 0 to 26, which is like really great. There's probably always room for improvement somewhere, but I think that that is pretty good as far as inclusivity goes. As far as my personal experience goes, I don't currently own any pieces from ModCloth. I did a couple years ago. I bought a sweater and I really loved it. It was really comfortable. I remember it was really well made. I did shrink it in the dryer and then I grew out of it. Combination of both those things happening at the same time. Mostly my bad, not really a testament to how they make their clothing. It was really fun while it lasted and it was really cute. The next company that I'm talking about is Voodoo Vixen. This is another UK-based brand that often sells their own clothes through Unique Vintage and ModCloth, but they have their own website as well. I've noticed that their clothing also seems to go very heavy on the 1950s inspiration, as most of these companies do, but they do also have a lot of clothing inspired by the 40s, 60s, and 70s. They're a British brand, so all of their prices are listed in British pounds. I translated that to American dollars. If you are a European viewer and wish that I hadn't done that, I apologize. Their dresses tend to range from $30 to $120. Pretty big range, but for context, all of the dresses that I like that are 50s fit and flare style tend to be about $75 in that range. Their tops range from about $25 to $55. Their skirts and pants range from about $30 to $70. and they sell accessories for usually less than $20. They are also a retailer that sells Besame Cosmetics, which is not sold in makeup stores near me at the moment, and I have kind of been dying to try them, so mental note to myself. For their ethics and sustainability, they do have an ethics statement on their website that says, "We do not consider ourselves a fast fashion brand. We design and build our clothes to last, staying in your wardrobe long past the latest season. Our sustainability strategy focuses on 3 key areas: ethical trading, environmental impact, and animal welfare." They're dedicated to never using any leather, fur, feather, or any other animal products. They also pride themselves in paying their UK warehouse workers wages that are higher than the current London minimum wage. They also say that they attempt to work with companies that share those values. As far as material, a lot of their clothing does include fabric blends that include polyester. Again, that's kind of just what's gonna happen at this point in the world, unfortunately. Sizing. Their sizes go from UK dress size 6 to 16, which in American sizes is 2 to 14. I think a lot of progress could be made there. I am a size 14, which means that their biggest size is my size, and that is the biggest size that they offer. The average American dress size is size 14, which means that there's a lot of people who are sizes larger than me, and the fact that their brand doesn't really have the sizing to allow people of bigger sizes to wear their clothing, room for improvement. As far as personal experience goes, I have one dress from Voodoo Vixen at the moment. It is probably my personal favorite because A, I love it, and B, for sentimental reasons. I remember I obsessed over it for months online. The moment that I saw it, I could not stop thinking about it, and my girlfriend finally got it for me as an anniversary present last year. I think it's pretty decent quality, but I will say that after having it for a couple of weeks, I was noticing some stitching was coming undone. There were a few loose strings all over it. I've had it for about a year, and the color is not as vibrant as it used to be. There's also quite a bit of pilling all over the fabric. Still, I do plan on buying a few more pieces from Voodoo Vixen in the future. I cannot resist. Some of the things just look too cute for me to handle. And I would be interested to see if the same thing happens with different dresses or if it's just this one specific dress. And the last company that I'll be talking about today is Hell Bunny. Hell Bunny is also a UK-based company, and they offer vintage reproduction clothing that tends to take most of its inspiration from the 50s, but they also offer clothing inspired by the 20s, 30s, 40s, 60s, and 70s. Hell Bunny is, I would still consider it mid-range price-wise, but it is a bit on the pricier end, more like Collectif. Their dresses typically range from $50 to $110, their tops ranging from $35 to $70, and their skirts and pants ranging from $50 to $80. They sell a few accessories, not a ton. They have like a few little beret hats that are each about $50, if that gives you a good idea of what their pricing is like there. As far as their ethics and sustainability goes, Hell Bunny does not currently have an ethics or sustainability statement available on their website, so I am not sure what their working conditions or environmental impact is like. Their clothing generally uses a mixture of cotton, viscose, and polyester. For sizing, Hell Bunny's sizing is offered in sizes extra small to 4XL, which in their sizing is about US sizes 4 to 18. Again, there's room for improvement, but I think that that's pretty decent. And as for personal experience, I have a cardigan from them, which I did not buy directly from them. I bought it off of Depop a few years ago, so it was pre-owned even before I had it, but it is in like perfect condition still, and I've worn it a lot over the past few years. Since they are a bit on the pricier side of the mid-range pricing, I'm not sure how many pieces I would be willing to buy from them in the future, but they're definitely a brand that I keep an eye on every now and then just to see. So those were all the brands that I wanted to cover today. Like I said, my next video will be kind of a part 2 to this one, wrapping up with brands that are very similar in price point and ethics to the brands I talked about today, as well as some on the fast fashion side. I'll be talking about like Shein and Romwe and some Amazon vintage brands as well. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun doing research for it and talking about it. I know that I learned a lot in my research about these brands that I have been buying from for a while and had just never looked into before. So I hope this information helps somebody at least feel like a more well-informed consumer. Again, this is a judgment-free zone. I totally understand everybody has different reasons and different values when it comes to buying clothing, and no matter what those reasons are, you deserve to wear clothing that makes you feel great about yourself. Thank you to everybody watching. So much love. I'll see you next time.